Thank you all for your time and attention today. My name is Michael Simpson. I'm a staff data scientist at Thorn. I've been working at the intersection of AI and child safety for the past 4 years. At Thorn, I lead our work on perceptual hashing and classifying child sexual abuse material, or CSAM. This supports our mission of accelerating victim identification, preventing re-victimization, and preventing abuse from happening in the first place. I also chair the IEEE working group on safety by design, which is what we're going to talk about today, although my views do not represent those of the IEEE or the working group. I'm glad for this opportunity to speak to you all about this. First, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about Thorn. Thorn is a technology nonprofit that develops products and programs aimed at combating child sexual abuse. We empower platforms and people with the tools and resources they need to protect children. In these conversations, it's really important to understand the scale of the problem that we're talking about. Offline and online sexual harms against children have both been accelerated by the internet. The child safety ecosystem is already overtaxed. In 2022 alone, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC, which is the clearinghouse for reports of this kind, received over 87 million images and videos of suspected child sexual abuse material. And in 2023, that number grew to more than 104 million. To add on to this, Thorn discovered that in the United States, 40% of minors had experienced someone online who they didn't know asking them for nude images. It was 29% of 9 to 12-year-olds. And this is not a US problem. In Germany, the number was 41%, and 1 in 2 12 to 13-year-old boys. However, technology is a double-edged sword. We need to use these tools to build the best tools that we can for the people who are defending the children. And we also need to understand misuse so that we can be there to proactively respond to problems. And machine learning is a critical component of this. It allows for rapid prioritization and triage of abuse material. These technologies can accelerate victim identification, stop re-victimization, and prevent abuse, which are our mission goals. I've dedicated my career to building tools and that make an impact in this area. I have gotten to see firsthand how analysts at hotlines, content moderators at tech companies, and law enforcement officers have all worked to speed up their pipelines using machine learning. But today we're talking about the impact of generative AI on this problem. And at first it might seem like that's removed from children, but it's not. Every single mission impact area is impacted by generative AI. For victim identification, I mentioned that it was a needle in a haystack problem. Finding those images that lead to the rescue of a child is already a very hard problem before we start churning out tons of photorealistic images of children that don't exist so that they can't be found. For re-victimization, this is documentation of the worst moments of a child's life, and now communities have come together to reimagine and intensify the harms that have already been done. For prevention, there's actually a few things that I want to go through. First of all, offenders who make these images, it might not seem like they're directly harming a child, but research shows that doing this normalizes the behavior, which lowers the barrier to hands-on abuse. Also, we're seeing peer-to-peer bullying and harassment happen. There was a great episode of The Daily last week that talked about this and went into a bunch of details that you should look at if you're interested. We also see sextortion, which is sexual extortion, which is when someone comes along and, they threaten to release nude images of the victim unless they either provide financial compensation or additional images. And this was a problem before generative AI, but now either the perpetrator can generate images of a child that doesn't exist to coerce images from the victim, or they can generate nude images that don't actually exist and threaten to release those. So all of these are huge problems. And then there's also precedent for these images being used as cover for people who share them. So you can claim that this image is an actual CSAM. It's just generative. And so this allows perpetrators to hide behind it and creates this false provenance. So this is sort of the reverse of what we saw in victim identification, but in a lot of ways it's worse because now you can hide from law enforcement that this child is out there and actually needs to be addressed. And so you've hidden the needs of the community. Okay, so let's talk about what this looks like in practice. First, let me introduce you to one more term, which is fine-tuning. That's when you take a model and you specialize it on something. So on the left, there's an image that was generated with an off-the-shelf model and an off-the-shelf prompt. And you can see that it made the image of the woman. And then if you apply a LoRa, and in this case, the LoRa is designed to make the image look more like Audrey Hepburn. And you can see it did a pretty good job of it. These LoRa's are lightweight and can be traded in chat rooms. And you could imagine that this could be an abuse victim instead of Audrey Hepburn. And then if we add on textual inversion, which is a learned phrase that represents a concept, in this case, younger, you can see that we've now produced an image of a younger Audrey Hepburn. If you want more information on this, the paper up in the corner has all the details. This is a paper put out by Thorn and Stanford. And I'll give you a minute. Cool. And this exists outside of video and image modalities. We see it across data modalities. So before generative AI, 2 in 5 children had been approached by someone online who they thought was attempting to befriend and manipulate them. In other words, groom them. And LLMs allow the industrialization of this. So now, instead of having the offender having to interact with the child individually, you can get a mass individualized grooming that goes out. Also, it allows people to practice grooming behaviors and find out what works on the algorithm. And finally, it allows them to play out fantasies, which again, lowers that barrier to hands-on abuse. So that's all the bad news. I want to talk about the solution. So Thorn and All Tech is Human came together to bring all of the generative AI companies you see on the screen to develop a set of principles and mitigations that we can use to address this proactively rather than reactively. So from the ground up, we can design models that avoid this. We are at a very small sliver of time when we can do something about this because the models that are out there are not that good yet. And so if we can get ahead of this, we can prevent this from becoming worse. This outlines the entire life cycle of machine learning from model development to deployment to maintenance. So if you want more details, the QR code on the screen goes to the white paper, which has a ton more details. I'm going to briefly go through all of the principles and the highest impact mitigations in the rest of this talk. Okay, so for model development, responsibly source training data sets and safeguard them from child sexual abuse material. Incorporate feedback loops and iterative stress testing in our development process, and employ content provenance, data source tracking with adversarial misuse in mind. So the first two of these are really designed to keep models from spreading that generate CSAM. The last one is designed to shrink that haystack and also, when we have a problem, be able to figure out where it came from. For model deployment, we should safeguard our generative AI products and services from abusive content and conduct, responsibly host models, and encourage developer ownership over safety by design. So this first point makes it easier, or makes it harder to share CSAM and to generate it. The bottom two makes it harder to distribute CSAM generating models. So both models that are able to generate CSAM and those that are designed explicitly for that purpose. For maintenance, we want to prevent our services from scaling access to harmful tools, invest in research and future technology solutions, and fight CSAM, AIG CSAM, and CSAM on our platforms. So the first point here is designed to make it less accessible for people to get to these tools. Right now, it's very easy to find tools that can create harm. Investing in research and future technology solutions helps keep our edge sharp and helps us stay proactive and ahead of the problem. Fighting CSAM, AIG CSAM, and CSAM, this recognizes that this is not a problem that's isolated to generative AI. It exists as an ecosystem, and we need to fight it that way. So for the mitigations, the first one is responsibly sourcing your training data. So make sure that the data that you have represents the values that you want expressed in the models, because this is key. The second is detect, remove, and report CSAM and CSAM from your training data. This is really important because I think everyone saw the Lion data set about a month ago. Stanford found CSAM in that data set, and that was probably the most widely used image data set out there. So even if you think you have a good data set, it's still important to double check. Separate depictions and representations of children from adult sexual content in your image, video, or audio generation training data sets. This is important. Models should not be able to generate both adult pornography and images of children. There's no reason for them to be able to do both of those tasks at the same time, and it makes it too easy to merge those concepts. Conduct red teaming for AIG CSAM and CSAM. I think that this is going to become standard security practice, and it just hasn't been adopted yet. It's a place where we see prompt injection already happening, and this should just be standard practice when you release a model, is make sure that it doesn't have big open security vulnerabilities. Include content provenance by default. Again, we need to know if something's AI generated and where it came from so that if there's a problem, we can address it. For model deployment, detect abusive content at the inputs and the outputs. So this is important. We saw by fine-tuning, they were able to generate content that they wanted without prompting it for that. So it's really important that it happens at both levels. And making sure that people aren't trying to prompt for this content is also important. Include user report, feedback, and flagging options. We need to remember that most people are not bad actors, and we need to give the opportunity for the community to come back to us and tell us when there's an issue with the model so that we can address it. Include an enforcement mechanism. So this is for models. We need to, when there's a problem with a model, we need to have a plan and know what we can do so that we can isolate it and address it quickly. Assess generative models before access. We need to test things before we serve them to the world to make sure that we're not making it easy for people to create mass harms. And then finally, on maintenance, we should remove services for nudifying images of children from search results. It's too easy to access these services, and they cause too much harm. We should not be indexing them and elevating them in search engines. When reporting to NCMEC, use the generative AI file annotation. This both helps the analysts at the beginning, but it will also help all of us as this gets added to hash lists. And then we can differentiate between generative images and real images. Detect and remove from your platform known models that were explicitly created to create AIG CSAM. So this is important. We're starting to see models that were generated for the explicit purpose of making CSAM. We should stop them and make sure that we're not the ones hosting them. Retroactively assess currently hosted generative models, update them with mitigations in order to maintain platform access. This is just patching your software. We need to make sure that we don't have big open exploits that have been there since the beginning that we haven't addressed. Detect, report, remove, and prevent CSAM, AIG CSAM, and CSAM on your platforms. I talked about this before. This is something that sort of understands that this is an ecosystem. We both need to denormalize this and make it harder for to end up in training data sets. And then finally, invest in tools to protect, invest in tools to protect content from AI-generated manipulation. This is things like Adobe's PhotoGuard and Nightshade that allow users to opt their images out. And so if we can invest in these, we can give people tools to make sure that their images aren't in-painted to show things that they don't want them to. Finally, maintain the quality of your mitigations. This is both technological and educational. This is something that we should be doing. That's the paper that Thorn put out. I wanted to mention, we're working on IEEE standardization. We had our first meeting at the end of May. This is gonna be a standard that anyone can adopt. If you're interested, I would really like all of your voices here. And so that's sort of the next step here. And I wanted to give you some tangible takeaways. First, put safety at the forefront of your work, whether it's child safety or other safety. What we do can magnify impact, and we need to make sure that it's not magnifying harm. And so we have the opportunity to do that in our work. Second, adopt these organizations as your principles. I assume most of you, since you came to this conference, work with data or generative AI in some capacity. That means you have a role to play here, and it's really important that you do the responsible thing. Get involved with the standardization project. Again, I would like all of your voices there. It would be really helpful. And follow Thorn's work. We're a nonprofit devoted to this, and so we're a great source of information on it. I want to thank you all for coming to this. I really appreciate all your time.